You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 319 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Damer and I'll be your host. And I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville today. How's it going, Pat?
It's going great, Jeremy. Happy 4th.
It is 4th of July week here as we record this on a Monday. Looking ahead at a crucially important week for the Cubs after just a tough homestand. Since their victory in London, the Cubs have proceeded to just lose 7 of 8 again, and it's hard to see this team not being sellers if they don't have a huge week ahead. 4 games against the Brewers, 3 against the Yankees before heading to the All-Star break. We will talk about the Cubs All-Stars. We're going to preview this Brewers series. We've got a guest on to help us do that. Let's bring him on right now. And we've got, you know him from his many contributions to this podcast, helping us break down the Milwaukee Brewers. He's got his own shows for his own podcast for the Brewers as well, and Packers. And he's our Wisconsin sports friend, longtime friend of the show, Paul Noonan. Thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs and Brewers with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
And yeah, this is a tough stretch for the Cubs. We wanted to first kind of get your thoughts before we delve into a lot of the Cubs specific talk. Let's get a little state of the Brewers. Where are the Brewers right now besides battling for first place in the division as a team, health-wise, schedule-wise? How's things going?
Oh, well, let's see. They are amongst the most boring teams in Major League Baseball. And I watch pretty much every game, and I come to that opinion honestly. They are fairly injured, though they've been getting a little bit better lately. They have had quite a few health problems this year. Chief amongst those is Brendan Woodruff not being available. He is almost back, but did apparently suffer some minor kind of setback over the last few days. But they've been without him, one of their 2 best starting pitchers for essentially the entire season after the first couple weeks. They're missing quite a few position players. It's hard to go over. Say the Brewers don't have any important position players other than really Christian Yelich and William Contreras. So they're all kind of important. Like Tyrone Taylor's hurt. Luis Urias he was hurt to start the season, and now he is, I think, on the fake DL right now as someone who has been struggling a lot and needs a little bit of mental health work. Mike Brasso, who isn't good but is important to the Brewers, has been off and on. And they just seem to shuffle, especially offensive players. It's a revolving door. There's been like 58 Brewers this year. I've already forgotten the names of like a dozen of them. The thing about them is they're bad at offense and they're pretty bad at starting pitching. All they really do well is turn balls in play into outs, and that's been enough so far because this division, as you guys know, is just a catastrophe.
So, Paul, over the years, the Cubs and the Brewers have had quite the rivalry. The fan bases go back and forth and take pride in beating each other or being on top. Something weird has happened this year in that I talked to a lot of Brewers fans who say, oh, we might be in first place, but we're terrible. You're probably going to catch us and beat us, almost sort of matter-of-factly. Meanwhile, my Cubs fans are saying, well, we're never going to catch the Brewers because we suck. So it's just a weird spot that both teams' fan bases have almost like ceded the season to each other, but nobody seems to want it, I guess, although the Brewers may be pulling away here if the Cubs don't do something this week.
I wouldn't wager on that too heavily. So I'm going to be one of these Brewer fans here. And I do think so. I know we're higher on the Cubs because for the longest time they've had the one positive run differential in the division, and I mean, I pay a minor amount of attention to the Cubs. The thing that I find most shocking about them is that they have 10 saves this year, which seems impossible. Like it's truly incredible. It's something worth paying attention to for the rest of the season. But the Brewers just are. I feel like a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I think a lot of the Brewers' pessimism is from an honest place because they've really been carried in the first half by Wade Miley, who is 100 years old and a contact pitcher who has been good with them before.
Wade Miley is scheduled to get hurt soon, by the way. I think.
He's already been hurt once. It's already happened once. It will definitely happen again as well. And Julio Teheran, who is getting the ever-loving stuffings beaten out of him at this very moment, started out like gangbusters and has turned into a pumpkin over the last 2 games, which is not.
I forgot he was still in baseball. Until
he wasn't. He wasn't. He'd been out of baseball for 2 years.
Okay,
and then
that makes sense.
Their other best pitchers so far this year is an unheralded rookie named Colin Ray. And I do a podcast on the Brewers with my friend Ryan Topp, who is like a big prospects guy. And we were talking about Colin Ray when we recorded yesterday. And I was like, and Colin Ray is contributing. And I've never heard of him. Maybe you have, Ryan. Ryan's like, nope, haven't. Didn't hear of him before this season.
I thought he played soccer for Richmond or something. I don't know. It sounds like
he probably does. He's a winger, I think. Yeah. But like his, throws like low 90s, high 80s, and is just a junk baller. So Corbin Burns has been bad, and Freddie Peralta has been pretty bad too. And the Brewers being in first place with that fact in place is actually incredible. And that's why nobody thinks this is going to continue because Teheran is regressing to the mean right now. I think everybody thinks Wade Miley will too, and Colin Ray as well. And if Burns and Peralta don't turn it around simultaneously, their pitching is going to get very bad very quickly.
Milwaukee,
who else in the division?
Milwaukee and Cincinnati are playing themselves 9 times
in
the next 4 weeks.
We played
there you go.
We played them 9 times over 16 games, including 6 times in a row. And those are the last 9 games we have against the Reds. Now, we do not face them in August or September. So that might decide, that'll probably be a trade deadline, matchup more than anything, but may decide the division too. I do like the Reds quite a bit. I mean, they didn't start very well, but adding Ellie De La Cruz is like adding like a 5 minimum win player, and I think it made them noticeably better. That I think they came by their winning streak, honestly, and I would pick them to probably win the division right now, but I would have the Cubs right there with them, and I think the Brewers will tail off. I just don't see this being sustainable for them.
Is it fair to say that none of us think that the Pirates are for real?
No,
I'm on board with that. Yeah, they've been injury bugged a little bit too. I feel like if they were a little healthier, they might be a little pluckier. But it's maybe, not going to happen.
But I also have noted that the last 12 NL Central games the Pirates have played. Do you know their record is 0-12?
Yes, yes, I did know that.
It's hard to win a division if you refuse to beat anybody in it.
It absolutely is. I mean, they started like gangbusters, but yeah, they have a little bit of a ways to go here. I agree with that. It's funny that we don't seem that threatened by the Cardinals because that's a new place.
It's nice. It's refreshing.
Right.
I'll say that.
It's well deserved.
Yes.
So with these next 4 games coming up here before the All-Star break, could the Cubs get lucky? And the Brewers are looking past them to these games against Cincinnati, or is this? Is it basically the Brewers are in the same spot the Cubs are in, where every single one of these games over the next 4 weeks is crucial to making your position buying or selling at the deadline?
I think it's really that. They're not going to look past the Cubs because the Cubs are in the same general vicinity as the Reds are. There's no reason to look past them, and so you're not going to get that benefit. I don't know if they're going to get lucky or not because I don't think they're that much different skill-wise. It's just a matter of playing the Brewers is mostly about who you get to face on any given day and how many left-handed starters you have. The Brewers this year have something like a 150 batting average against left-handed starters. I think they have like 1 win on the year against a left-handed starter. It might be 0. I haven't checked in a while. They
promise not to start any lefties against you. How about that?
Please. If you throw a bunch of righties out there, then you're going to have a bad time. But teams tend to stack lefties. Even they'll just go get random lefties out of triple and double A, and that works just fine. Against the Mets, they threw some lefty from like literally double A who had like an 8 ERA, and he shut us out for 7 innings and had like a no hitter through 4. Like that's kind of the Brewers' big Achilles heel, and as long as you do that, you'll be okay. If you throw righties against them, then it's a different story. But most teams don't do that, so unless they have to. Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. And the Packers, geez, I'm wrong season. The Brewers' offense is just not like, even they're at their best, they're just very, very poor. Their highest OPS on the team is Yelich, and it's 808. Like, that's the best OPS on the whole team. There's not even a small sample size guy that's higher than that. It's just a team of like guys who don't make. They tried to fix the team to have more contact this year. If that hasn't worked, they strike out more. Their contact is worse, and they hit a comically low number of doubles. The guys who are good at getting on base are too slow to steal. And you guys know baseball this year, they made it so easy to steal bases. Not being able to do it is a huge strike against you. They have some fast guys. They just never get on base. So
I noticed Rowdy Tellez is yet to attempt a steal this year.
Yes, that's correct.
Not shocked.
He is he's having a bad year aside from all of that, but he also is just not a threat on the base pass. Like, it's a weird change in baseball where
because he weighs 290 pounds.
Yeah, well, and
part of the problem.
Being a good OBP guy used to be kind of the same, whether you were a huge giant guy or a little fast guy, because stealing didn't happen that much. And now that's not true anymore at all. Like, now if you're a high OBP guy and you're slow, you're way, way worse than all of the high OBP guys who can actually take the extra base. And aside from all that, Rowdy's not getting on base like he did anymore anyway. He's having a horrible year. I think they'll be running first baseman through the organization for the foreseeable future to try and find somebody who can actually play there.
We've had these first baseman Brewer conversations in the past, by the way.
They do it. They don't care about it. Yep, I know. They don't care about the position. They just bring in a new guy every year. It's a revolving door, and it works occasionally for like a month or two, and it's just a team of Brian LaHarris. That's all it is.
Well, Cubs are new to that the past few years, but we've been doing the same pattern.
Yeah, I've noticed remarkably similar success.
Yep, I've noticed you guys are like pretty good up and down the lineup, except for first base and DH.
So looking ahead to those pitching lineups, we do have the Monday game is Smiley and Smiley for the Cubs. On Tuesday, Hendricks and Miley, and then Steele and Hauser.
Okay.
And then Stroman and Peralta to end the week. So you do get 2 of the Cubs All-Stars pitching in the series.
Yeah, and we don't have any, so that's not true. We have 1.
You have 2 really good pitchers in Woodruff and Burns, I think. And when Woodruff comes back, that's like getting like an All-Star, Cy Young caliber level player back, which is what concerns me, because you've been doing it without that. And don't sell yourself short. Plus, I think when I look at the stats, or the standings, really, which are stats, I guess, of a kind, and I see the Cubs are 6 games behind the Brewers. The 6 games may not seem like a lot, but we're over halfway through the season now. So when I look at the Cubs and I look at the Brewers, I'm like, well, okay, to beat the Brewers, you're probably going to need to win 86 games. Maybe more, but at least 86. I mean, you could beat them with fewer, but only if lots of things go wrong. And I don't think anyone should ever anticipate like winning the division with 81 wins. But
right.
86 wins for the Cubs moving forward would involve going like they'd have to do much better than they've done. They'd have to go like 48-32 the rest of the way. 48-32 for the Cubs. I just don't see where that happens. Just because that's all. I mean, even from a winning percentage standpoint, 48-32. I mean, that's
it's tricky. Agreed.
It is tricky. You have to play 600 ball the rest of the way, and I don't know how we're going to play 600 ball when one of our starting pitchers refuses to win, and leaving the other 4 pitchers in the awkward position to win most of the time.
Yeah. Well, have you guys played the A's yet?
3 times.
You did? Okay. All right. Well, that takes away one advantage because we got swept by them. So that's 3 wins everybody gets for free on us.
You know who we do play? And at the beginning of the year, I was looking at the second half schedule, as I'm prone to do. And I thought, okay, well, the Cubs have a tough first half and then it gets easier. And I still think that's the case generally. But one of my hopes in September, and you pointed this out, Paul, with the fact that you don't play as many divisional games in September as you used to. So it's like, okay, well, who are we going to play instead? And I looked, it's like, okay, San Francisco, Arizona, Colorado. Wow, we play them each a lot, like 6 times each. I'm like, we could really clean up. But unfortunately, Arizona decided they're going to be good.
Yep, they're good. They're legit.
Out of the blue. So that's 6 games that I thought those 6 and the 6 against Colorado would be 12 like patsies in September. And of course, that's not the case. And then we end up playing the Braves at Atlanta for 3 and then Milwaukee at 3 to end the year. And all of a sudden, my hopes for an easy September have been somewhat crushed.
Yes, you never can tell in advance, can you?
No.
Honestly, I don't know. For the Brewers, it's barely mattered. Like I said, they got swept by the A's. They've actually done pretty well against some of the better teams. It just seems like really random from our perspective, and schedule strength almost doesn't matter. I think for the Brewers, especially, it's much more just about who you happen to have pitching and who the other team what handed pitcher the other team happens to have, more than actual quality of the team itself. So our September actually looks pretty easy on paper. There's a couple of tough stints with the Dodgers and the Rangers back to back for a really long road trip. But those easy games haven't been easy for Milwaukee. Like, they have a bunch of Washington and a bunch of Colorado. Colorado's had their number like for seemingly ever now, and I'm kind of sick of it. So I'm not even looking forward at schedule strength, because it also could just flip on a dime, and Milwaukee, I feel like, is kind of hanging on for dear life on health anyway. It could go south pretty quickly if they suffer any more injuries.
All right. Well,
I could talk positively about their bullpen. That's one thing that's good.
Yeah, I noticed that even without Josh Hader, right?
Yeah. The Josh Hader trade was not popular, but I'm gonna, first of all, it was wrong. They didn't do great in it, but they're so good at making the bullpen work that it doesn't really matter that he's gone that much. And they're good at rebuilding on the fly. Devin Williams is their one All-Star, and he is one of the best closers in baseball. He has his famous pitching ninja airbender changeup, idiot. And is at least fun to watch. They have like 4 guys who are fun to watch, and he's one of them. And then they're just really, really good at finding these kind of out of nowhere guys and promoting them up and getting good results out of them. So Joel Payamps, I think, they got him a trade in the offseason as a throw-in, and I forget who that was for. But he's been really, really good. And Elvis Peguero, who has been slowly climbing up the ranks all season, throws high heat, throws very well, and he has been nails as well. So their bullpen, when it's healthy, Bryce Wilson's awesome too. I forgot about him. They have quite a few of them. When they're healthy, they're really good. They do run their bullpen ragged pretty frequently. This actually happened to them against Pittsburgh the other day when they just ran out of guys. So that matters a lot too, in terms of what, if you're facing them and you catch them on a post bullpen game, you can make some hay against them, because they do run out of depth pretty quickly. But if they're all sort of well rested and Craig Counsell's done a good job juggling them, they turn one run games into victories better than just about anybody else.
So, is there anyone, when we talked about the All-Stars on the teams here, is there anyone who you felt was snubbed on the Brewers? Didn't get an All-Star pick, but really should have.
So not really. The only one you can really make a case for is Yelich, who has been, I think, one of the 3 best left fielders in baseball this year. But that said, I don't really believe in just assigning the All-Star game based on the first half of this season. You have more data than that. The All-Star game happened at halfway point of last season, and Yelich was garbage for the second half of last season, and he's been good for 2 months. So I'm not going to call that a snub, even though statistically it probably is technically a snub. But not really. Nobody on their offense deserves to make it. You can make maybe a case for William Contreras, but there's a lot of other good catchers. So again, not a huge deal. And then the guys that you would normally see make it pitching wise haven't been good. Burns has been legitimately bad, and he's your, I would say, go-to Brewer to get in there, and he doesn't deserve it. So I think that they made the right call on the Brewers with just the closer, and everybody else needs to play better if they want to make the All-Star team. They've been rough.
I have to say, you talked about Rowdy Tellez, and he's famously the overweight first baseman who was quite good last year and has shrunk not in size but in performance this year. And we talked about Yelich a little bit, and that always pains me to see him come back from the dead like Rasputin. But the one that I'm most sort of surprised by is this Willie Adames guy. I thought he was going to be a star last year at shortstop, and I'm like, oh, just what we need is, for the Brewers to start reloading with young players who are going to be around forever and cause us fits.
Yeah.
But he hasn't really done that as much as I would have thought this year.
Yeah, I think he had like when they first acquired him, there was a lot of noise made that he didn't like the batter's eye in was he Tampa or Florida? Wherever he was in Florida. And he started off like gangbusters, but I think that did cause a lot of people to overrate what his offensive ceiling is. And it's higher than this. And you can kind of see in Adames' numbers that his batting average is very low. It's 203, but his on-base percentage is 289. Like the walks are still there. He's just had some batting average on balls in plays issues, and he has a fair number of home runs. The power seems to still be there too. I did like some spreadsheet work the other day and comparing people's like production via OPS or WOBA versus their barrels. And one of the biggest differences in the game is Adames. He's still barreling the ball really well, and so he might actually regress positively as we go on here. I think there's some of that waiting for him there, but he's not like a top end shortstop. He's a good second tier shortstop. By Prospectus's numbers, he is like the best defensive shortstop in baseball. So he has a high floor, and anything he gives you on offense is kind of a bonus. But yeah, I think we were all hoping for more too, and I don't think that's what it is. I think he's just kind of a low batting average, high power guy, and that's how he's going to be most of the time.
I mean, he was like a 30 homer, 100 RBI guy last year. He was, and 30 doubles. He showed a lot of pop. And that has, and he showed that the year before too. Like, I don't know what happened there, but maybe he'll regain that too. I mean, it seems weird that at age 27 he loses strength.
So I don't think the power is actually that big of a problem. And at the end of this season, I think he's probably going to be around that home run and doubles number. Like he'll probably finish with something like 27-ish home runs and probably something like 25 to 27 doubles. It really is just
singles.
It's singles not falling in that are mostly his problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunate, but true. He's also like none of the Brewers have some super, like a lot of young guys who are really fast. Like Joey Weimer and Bryce Terang are super fast guys, but a lot of their like skill position middle guys who are veterans are shockingly slow, and he is one of them. He and Luis Urias, for being like kind of tiny middle infielders, are just amazingly slow. It's really, really weird.
Who on this Cubs team, when you look at the Cubs roster, who impresses you the most among the Cubs players right now, or has surprised you the most this year in terms of how well they've done? We could talk about how poorly some people have done, but that would take more than we have time for today. But who would you say as a neutral sort of outside observer who lives in the Chicagoland area, but also as a Brewers person?
Sure.
Who are you like, oh, he's better than I thought?
Well, I actually went to Christopher Morel's first career home run, and I have paid attention to him since then. And I'm surprised he's been this good. I thought he'd be good. He has good power, but he, I think, is the most impressive offensive player I've seen out of them. I know he has not been around as much as some of the other people there, but he looks like you might have something there with that guy. So he would be my number one. And then I actually was not a huge Dansby Swanson fan. I actually viewed him as kind of like what Willie Adames is now, which is a super high floor based on defense and an okay but not great offensive player. He's actually been a little better offensively than I thought he was, and he's been better than this in the past, but his on-base percentage has actually been really, really good. He seems to be a good timely hitter, and whenever I watch him, he plays really well. Looking at his numbers now, he's not as good as I thought he was, but whenever I watch Dansby Swanson, he's awesome.
I've been watching the last couple of weeks quite a bit, and I haven't seen the timely hitting I was hoping for.
I haven't seen a Cubs game in a little while here, so that's probably the case. But like Morrill's great. By the way, in Christopher Morrill's game where he hit his first home run, it was also Dan Vogelbach's first career triple. They were playing the Nationals. And
which
I
is a more unlikely event, frankly.
it has to be the triple. And I had fun telling everybody around me in the stands, like, that is Vogelbach's first triple. You guys just witnessed history. So.
Well, but if it weren't for Dan Vogelbach, we wouldn't have had Montgomery closing out the World Series. So, I mean, it's one of those losses we're going to have to sustain, I guess.
Indeed.
I was just going to ask Paul, as an NL Central watcher here, if you had to predict how the season's going to end, I know you're kind of bearish on Milwaukee, but who wins the division and how many wins does it take to win this division?
I think I will pick the Reds there. They also have a few more bullets in AAA that they may end up calling up later too. And I think that they've made the most improvements out of sort of the morass of the 500 teams that make up the NL Central. But the way that the schedule is now balanced, I bet it'll be a shockingly low number to win the division. Like, I bet it'll be right around 500 to win the division, like 83 or 84 games. I think it'll be sad and kind of unexpected. I don't think everybody's internalized how the balanced schedule has impacted both of the centrals here. Like, it's really, I think, highlighted how poor they are compared to the other divisions on the coasts. And I think you're going to get like a round 500 winner. So I think it'll take like 83, 84 to get it done. And I think it'll be the Reds.
Did the Cardinals win a World Series with 83 wins in the regular season once? So I look at that as an opportunity.
It was right around there. They won with a half game lead over the Astros when they won that World Series. There was a game that was not completed because it didn't matter somehow, that I've never managed to figure out, because it seems like it should. Maybe it was a game and a half. That could be. But,
okay.
Yeah, one of their undeserved World Series. Annoying.
With we're gonna be looking at some of the free agents, the big free agent signings, at the halfway point of this season. For the Brewers, their free agency this season, how have the free agents performed for them? And anything you want to chime in on that as part of our discussion for later?
I shouldn't laugh, but because one of them has been actually okay. But their big free agent signing was Jesse Winker, who this is good cautionary tale. Never sign a guy who was extremely good against you, because then when they stop playing you, it might go away. And Jesse Winker had a rough offseason. He had an injured neck and some other bad injury that you don't want to have as a professional athlete, and he's been absolutely atrocious. He was on the DL for a while and came back with that neck injury, and he finally hit a home run after like 2 months. But they counted on him for some power that they lost when they lost Renfroe, and it's just not there. He might be washed, and I think they'll look to replace him. The other one, though, more under the radar, was Brian Anderson, who he's an okay hitter. He has a 91 OPS plus, but is a really good defensive player and gives them the versatility that they like in their defensive kind of shuffly guys. He mainly plays third base, where he's one of the best third basemen in baseball, but he can shift into the outfield and specifically into right field because he has, I believe, the strongest position player arm in baseball. I think he has the hardest throw this year of any fielder. So he's actually worked out pretty well. And like I said, they do turn balls into outs like better than everybody else does. So they do have good defensive players, and that's where they actually have succeeded a little bit. It just, makes them boring. That's all. The other one's Owen Miller, and I only point him out. He's not good, but he did lead the team in OPS plus for quite a long time. He's come back to earth now. But he started the first month with a 1% average velocity off the bat. What do we call that again? He's up to 3% now.
Exit velocity?
Yeah, exit velocity. He was 1% for a long time. He's up to 3%. And I don't know how you
punt? What
No,
does he do?
he has 4 kind of mammoth home runs and 15 speed doubles, which most of that slugging's from doubles. But he just is great at hitting soft liners in front of outfielders. Not much bunting. But I just like that he's actually produced pretty well despite never, ever, ever hitting the ball hard, except that, he kind of walked into a few home runs. But that's it. Otherwise, Wade Miley, he was free agent. He's worked out great, but he will get hurt eventually, and that'll wear off. But the Winker one really hurt him. It's one of the reasons their offense is underperformed so much.
Pat, any last questions for Paul before we let him go and wrap up this podcast?
No, I appreciate you giving your honest perspective as always on the Brewers, and the season will end in Milwaukee for 3 games between these two teams, and
Yep.
by all accounts, those 3 games might be meaningful to one or both of those teams.
They might.
Good luck against the Reds.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm glad that does come before the trade deadline. But one of the problems with being in the Central is it can't really get away from anybody. And so it's hard to know whether to buy or sell. You really have to have a good, I think, honest opinion of your team. And the Red Series, the 9-game stretch here will at least make it clear, I think, where the Brewers stand. So, yep. Appreciate the good luck. We'll try and knock them down.
Last question for me. If the Brewers are in a position to buy at the trade deadline, as the Brewers and
you
Cubs,
want Marcus Stroman.
as the Brewers and Cubs are both in the position of having tons of holes that need to be filled.
Yeah.
What is kind of the priority you'd like to see the Brewers address if they were buyers?
I would like to see them get a DH or a first baseman that can hit with some amount of power. That would be nice. But honestly, they shouldn't buy because they do have there's so many weird holes that it's not going to like push them into real contending. And honestly, if they sold, they still might win the division. Like I don't think that they could sell in a way that would make it impossible. Like they wouldn't be that bad. There's just no way to do it. So they do need a
position.
Yeah, they need a first baseman, but they probably shouldn't be buyers. Like this is going to have to be sort of a homegrown reload if they're, serious contenders again in the future. And there's no reason to send out prospects for, some middling first baseman to make them mildly more threatening on offense.
Well, Paul Noonan, always a pleasure catching up with you and having you educate us on what's going on in Milwaukee. Please remind our listeners where they can find your work and how they can follow you on Twitter.
Sure. So on Twitter, I'm Badger Noonan. If Twitter dies, I'm that everywhere. So you can always find me. And I do the Milwaukee's Tailgate podcast, which just came out today for the week. And during football season, I do a Packer-focused podcast called Reporting as Eligible. And feel free to check that out as well. We, of course, talk about the Bears quite a lot. So it will be relevant, although maybe not pleasant, but relevant.
And I do love the NES games of the day that show up on your Twitter timeline as well. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's fun.
and thanks again. We'll have you on again soon. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Always good catching up with Paul Noonan. Pat, we've got a couple things to touch on. The news, of course, we mentioned Stroman and Steele, both Cubs All-Stars, and Dansby Swanson as well. This is the first time in a long time the Cubs have had more than the required one-player representative.
Otherwise known as the league minimum.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and well-deserved, too. The Cubs, despite the record and despite a lot of other things, one of the fun parts of the Cubs this year is watching 2 of the best pitchers in the National League and have them both be on your team, which, despite the being 6 games under 500 overall, it is fun to watch Marcus Stroman. It is fun to watch Justin Steele, especially, Stroman, who remember the Cubs signed like minutes before the player lockout. Thank God they did a couple of years ago. And then Steele, who apparently, and I didn't know this, but apparently professional baseball teams are allowed to draft players and then develop them and have them turn into good players for your team. And
I've heard about that.
Side of that, yeah.
Never experienced it.
I think the last one before him was Carlos Zambrano, maybe, or Mark Pryor. I guess Mark Pryor.
Mark Pryor, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's nice. Every decade, every generation or so, every 20 years or so, to develop somebody, and it's been huge, right, for the Cubs to have a guy who could come up, and that's sort of how we sort of envisioned this happening a decade ago with the new regime, and sure enough, these are the fruits of that. And then Dansby Swanson, who was the big free agent acquisition in the offseason, $25 million plus over many years, has played very well on defense, as we've seen. The offense has dipped a little bit here lately, but still overall, he's been a huge contributor to the squad. And without him, both the defense and the offense would be suffering even more. So All three players are good. Fun to watch. I hope they all get to play. I hope both pitchers get to pitch at least an inning. That'd be nice. What are your thoughts?
I've had so much fun watching Marcus Stroman this year. I love what we've seen from Justin Steele. This has been it's so great to see those guys, especially when you have to watch a guy struggle like Tyone has, like Wisniewski did early, and you see so getting to see having that feeling of a starter come in and hey, we're gonna see a good outing. Cubs have a chance to win this game. And having that's a great way to go into watching a game. We haven't had that experience in a while. So
might take a one hitter, but this guy can help us win the game.
Yes, hopefully you there's no margin for error. Can't give up more than 2 runs, and yeah, it was great to see those guys get rewarded for the successes they're having this season.
Yeah, and you make a good point, which is that they have succeeded and played at a high level despite the pressure of knowing that basically they have to be near perfect every game in order to guarantee the team's going to win.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of teams out there. Can you imagine if they're playing on one of these teams that hits home runs left and right, scores a bunch of runs? How much easier that would be as a pitcher? I think we take for granted sometimes that how well they've done in light of the fact that they feel like they have to be perfect in order to succeed. And so, even more kudos to them.
Anybody you felt should have gotten a call but got snubbed? I think they got it right.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Christopher Morales played great. Problem is he came up on the 9th of May, and, that's too bad. Nice
I like Paul Noonan's take on that the All-Star voting should be attributed to not just the first half season stats, but the second half of last year plus the first half of this year. It should be a cumulative over that from the last All-Star game to now. All that those should be factored in. I like that approach. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah. So so I think they got it right. I think the Cubs had some good representation, and at least 2 of those players will still be on the team in 3 weeks. So that's nice.
So you mentioned Dansby Swanson, one of those all-stars, big Cubs free agent acquisition. Let's do some mid-season free agent grades.
All right, it's the mid-season.
It's officially
the mid-season. Start? Do we start with the big dog here?
You have to, yeah.
Okay, so Dansby Swanson before the season signed was it a 6-year deal? I can't remember, 5 or 6 years, and he's getting paid an average of about $25.3 million a year. And as we noted, he's an all-star this year. He's played impeccable defense. Seems to be a good team leader. Has hit the ball fairly well. And, he's maybe dropped off a little bit. But otherwise, has been everything he could have hoped for, I suppose, right? Let's hope that the slight drop-off in his offensive production is just sort of the roller coaster of hot and cold streaks that occur during a season rather than something longer lasting. But I think so far so good. What about you?
Yeah, I think he's exceeded my expectations, at least offensively, and definitely has. It's great when you can put him at short and then Nico becomes your second baseman and you've upgraded that position as well. So it's it was a great signing. Even if he wasn't, even if he was our 3rd or 4th pick of the available shortstops. But it's worked out well so far this season for the Cubs.
Yep. So I guess it's been a successful free agency if we stop there. But they signed other free agents, didn't they?
Nobody was playing first base, so they had to go make some moves there.
Yeah, they went out and got a first baseman by him, Eric Hosmer, who admittedly they didn't have to pay much money to. But can we agree that was probably not a solid choice?
No, he not only was
caught.
Not only was he bad, but he also cost you a few games along the way, single-handedly.
So what grade would you give the Dansby Swanson deal?
Dansby Swanson deal has to be an A.
Yeah, I think A minus maybe just because of the offense. But yeah, I'm not going to quibble over that. I think by the same token, Hosmer's probably an F.
Sure.
Expectations weren't super high, but obviously this was sort of the worst case scenario. He took up a bunch of his bats and didn't play as well defensively as we'd hoped, and then got cut. So also at first base / DH, the Cubs went out and got one Trey Mancini on a 2-year deal, $7 million a year, each of 2 years, $14 million total. What's your take on how that's worked out?
I feel like I should have had lower expectations offensively, but I didn't. I thought he was going to come in and perform at that DH or first base, but man, he has not been good. This is a D player for my grades.
He has not played like a guy who you give $7 million a year to for over $14 million total over 2 years. That's for sure, right? He's playing like a guy maybe you give $5 to $7 million in 1 year on a flyer and it doesn't work out. But yeah, so far his WAR right now is negative 1.2. So he's below replacement value, and you got him next year. And his defense has been far worse than I anticipated. And he isn't hitting for power like we'd hoped. And his average is, not good. His on base percentage also, not great. So yeah, you look at that, and his slugging percentage is really low. Like you said, 4 home runs in the first half of the season. I would have hoped for at least 10 to 12 personally, but this has been a bad one. I think a D is perfectly valid as a grade for him.
Yeah, definitely disappointing.
Was that one your idea? No, that was Jed's idea. Okay, never mind. All right, so we've gone through the first baseman, we've gone through the shortstop. Another one that I think people may forget about is Tucker Barnhart. Remember him?
Oh, yes.
He too makes $3.25 million this year and also next year. 2 years, $6.5 million deal. What's your take on that deal?
Yeah, this is rough, and it tells me that you had no idea what you were going to do with Miguel Amaya. You've got to. I would have thought they would have changed course by now, based on what they've seen from Miguel Amaya. But here we are. Tucker Barnhart still plays.
So Tucker Barnhart offensively, I feel, has been a disappointment. He's always been a terrible offensive player. Let's face it. His career OPS is 674. However, he reached new heights this year when he dropped his OPS to 497, which is really hard to do, even for a pitcher. And the one way you can accomplish that is to have a slugging percentage lower than your on-base percentage. And he, in fact, has achieved that. His on-base percentage is 271, which is bad, but his slugging percentage is 226, which is super bad. His OPS plus is 38, so 100 would be league average. He's at 38. He's got 2 extra base hits in 96 plate appearances. And to the extent that people say, well, yeah, but his defense is great. Okay, I will give him some credit for defense, but his overall WAR is still negative, even despite the defense. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you want to look at that, but to me, he's like a 1970s backup catcher.
Right.
And so if they signed him to a 1-year deal at that price, maybe passable, but 2-year deal, I don't see how you give him better than a C minus, given the fact that his offense is just so atrocious that he's an automatic out in an era when on a team where automatic outs are not helpful. You need more than that. So let's hope they don't come up with the automatic the computer balls and strikes umpire behind home plate, the robo ump, because that'll make it even worse. So yeah, he is.
I think you're generous
Only-
with the C. I could.
C minus. Well,
Yeah.
let's put it this way. I think it'd be even worse if Jan Gomes had a resurgence this year. Then it would have been even more sort of obvious and frightening. But let's move on to somebody who's a little bit easier to characterize, and that would be the Cubs starting pitcher acquisition. Guy who they're paying $68 million over 4 years. That's an average of $17 million a year. His name is Jameson Taillon. What do you make of that?
2-12 in the 14 games that Taillon has pitched for the Cubs this season.
Yeah, it could be over. Even if there were 500 in the games he pitched, that would put him almost at 500 for the season, right? So frustrating. But even though so they're 2-12 or whatever in games he's pitched, his ERA is only 7.07. Yeah, no, that's not good, is it? He's pitched in some bad luck. His FIP is only 5.17. But on the other hand, he is a guy who you pay $17 million a year to for 4 years, who in theory, he's 31, about to turn 32, was still in the prime-ish of his career. He got 3 more years in this guy, so it's got to get better. I mean, this is the worst year by far he's ever had, by factors of like 3 runs per game and ERA wise. I mean, his ERA last year is 3.91, 4.30, 4.10, 3.20, 4.44, 3.38 in previous years. So he's never approached this level of bad. I think right now he's an F, right? And a costly F if he doesn't get it together, because if the Cubs want to make a run at a playoff spot, they have to do one or two. They have to figure out what to do with this guy. On the one hand, when he pitches, it's just killing us, but you got him for 3 more years after this. So do you let him keep pitching and figure it out, or do you put him in the bullpen? Do you put him on the fake DL or IL? I mean, what do you do at this point to, I guess, mitigate your losses but hedge your bets?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about an automatic out with Barnhart. This is an automatic loss when he's pitching almost every time. You've got to get him out of the rotation. You've got to do something. The running him out there isn't going to work. This is, this gives me Quintana at the end of his Cubs career vibes here, when you're just dreading seeing him go out there every time. So I don't know. You've got to do something. I really hope that they make a move.
Quintana was Cy Young compared to this guy.
Yeah. So hopefully they do something, because he can't be in the rotation if he's going to pitch like this.
No,
definitely enough.
Yeah, if the Cubs are out of it, it'd be one thing to let him keep going, but if they're in a pennant race, every time they pitch him, they're compromising their position, I think. So, all right, so that's a bad one. Does Drew Smyly count in your eyes as a free agent, because he was a Cub? They re-signed him.
Yeah, I call it a continuation.
Okay, so let's not count that one. He's been fine. $9 million, $9.5 million a year, whatever. 2 years, fine. The next big acquisition was Michael Fulmer, who got off to a bit of a rocky start. Maybe Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
He was pretty Taillon-ish to start the year, which is what we call somebody with an ERA over 7. But then something miraculous happened, and he got good. And although his ERA is still 4.79, which is obviously not great, he has been more or less lights out for an extended period of time. He did give up a run, in the London series. But
yeah, he's just one earned run in his last 15 appearances.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. You would, since May 27th, he's going up 1 earned run. You'll take that, won't you?
Absolutely.
I certainly will.
Yeah. No,
so
he righted the ship.
It's hard to say where he's going to end up. He did cost him some games early in the year, that's for sure. But in middle relief and in lower leverage situations, he's been better. So I think that one is still up for grabs.
I could be convinced at a B- at this point.
Yeah, for a guy whose overall numbers are so ugly. Yeah, I mean, a 1-year, $4 million deal too is not that much of an investment. So I could go with B- or C plus. I think
Yep.
for Fulmer, maybe C plus in my book, but with a chance of getting better if he continues on the path he's down.
Right. As soon as you no longer think of him as the guy, he was thought of as going to be the Cubs closer. So
Yeah.
as soon as you think of him now as just a solid middle reliever, that ups his grade a little bit for me.
And then the Cubs have a bunch of guys who are arbitration eligible who don't really count, or when you're. Oh, I forgot one. Brad Boxberger. Who could have forgotten about that?
Ooh.
$2.8 million for 1 year, an option for another year if you want to play this game again. Brad, we hardly knew you. He has pitched in 17 games.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we
been
take
hurt.
an incomplete on this one?
Been hurt quite a bit. Not effective, 5.52 ERA and a 1.5 WHIP. Not effective when he has played, but then again, he hasn't played much. So I think the Cubs had counted on him and hoped for more. But the last time he threw a baseball was that god-awful Minnesota 11-1 game. Is that Mother's Day or something like that? It feels like it. May 13th. So he has not thrown since May 13th. That alone is probably F-worthy from the value perspective, because the Cubs, with the Cody Hoyer injury and the Brandon Hughes injuries, really could have used a healthy Brad Boxberger, but it was not to be. So, yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, definitely disappointing.
And I think that covers our free agents from what I can tell. I'm trying to. Oh, I forgot one. How could I forget? Center fielder Cody Bellinger, part-time first baseman.
Yes, Cody Bellinger.
$17.5 million for 1 year.
A
hurt
plus
for a period of time, but when healthy, he's been good.
A plus. Absolutely.
Certainly better than what they had. I would probably knock him down to a B because of the injury in terms of his overall value. He has missed 30 games this year out of 82 or so. But in terms of his offensive production, his defense, yeah. Minus the one ball that he let go under his legs when I was at the game the other night. What an awful game that was, the rain game. One of the rain games, the one where the game was supposed to start at 6 and it started at 9.
The Saturday game, yeah.
Yeah, it went till midnight. Yeah, that was a pretty awful play. But that play aside, and that was not going to change the outcome of that game. So I think he's been very good this year. So the question, of course, will be what to do with him. Do you trade him? Do you re-sign him? Do you block a PCA? Do you play him at first and lose some of his defensive value? Who knows? But he's been a good signing. They had the money and nothing else to do with it. So he filled a hole, and he's filled it well when he's been healthy.
Yeah, and again, a guy who we had a lot of low offensive expectations for, and he has exceeded those extremely well. So a lot to be excited about when Cody Bellinger's playing.
I think that if you look at the acquisitions as a whole, but for the Teon acquisition, like if Jameson Teon was pitching like Drew Smyly is pitching, nothing spectacular, but solid enough, right? ERA just under 4, maybe. Pitching deep into most games, serviceable all the way around. I think that would, if that were the case, I'd say that overall this has been probably, despite some of the misses of the lower value guys, maybe still like a B plus kind of off season, because they were able to fill important holes like shortstop and center field, et cetera. But that one really hurts because that's a 4-year deal. That's the Cody Bellinger will be long gone along with most of these other guys when Teon is still here. And if they end up straddled with a $17 million a year contract for the next 4 years, and he doesn't turn it around, doesn't get better, that's going to be a real bad thing for the Cubs. So overall, my grade, I think, for this offseason is probably a B to B minus with some thoughts that they could go up. Plenty of room to go up, depending on how some of these guys bounce back in the second half.
I think that's fair. I think the positions they got right were key: shortstop and center field. So they did a great job there. They missed poorly on the bullpen and starting pitching. So B minus, trending C plus.
Yeah.
Overall.
And some other things have gone right, like Christopher Morel coming up and doing well, whereas the Matt Mervis experiment has not done well so far.
So far, we got time.
Hayden Wisniewski has been a real disappointment too this year. We, especially after spring training, had high hopes for him, but that's been mitigated by Kyle Hendricks coming back, pitching well, and of course Steele and Stroman, who we talked about earlier. I think the bullpen has been the same. Boxberger was disappointed with the Hughes injury, and the Cody Hoyer injury were killers, and even some of the Fulmer performance in the first part of the year. But Keegan Thompson just kind of imploding on himself. Forget about him. And yet, Alzolay and Merriweather and Leiter, have done well enough to kind of hold things together. So, that's kind of a mixed bag too.
Yeah, it's been a rough first half when it comes to the roller coaster ride that is this team. You get high highs and low lows here.
You sure do, don't you? And I was thinking about that. Like you were talking about, the last week and how disappointing it was, and rightfully so, that the Cubs went 1-5 on that homestand, right? And the previous week they'd gone 4-1. So we were kind of coming off a high, after that Pittsburgh St. Louis thing. And the week before that, the Cubs had, one of their best weeks of the year, 5-1 versus Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So that was a big deal. But then the week before that, they lost. They were 2-5. So it's been a real roller coaster, and it hasn't been like. You don't have a lot of 3-3 weeks. It's been all or nothing for this team, and that's, I think, what makes it so frustrating is they've had these extended periods where they just lose a bunch of games. They had a 1-6 week against Minnesota or against Houston and then Philadelphia. But then they've also had some stretches where they won a bunch of games and they went 5-2. So, we talk every week, and depending on what kind of week we've had, it's either glass half empty or half full. And last week when we spoke, I was having trouble articulating my thoughts on this team because I don't want to say this is a team that's in limbo, because it's not that they're in limbo. It's just that it's like they're either good or they're bad, but they haven't really shown their true selves yet. Like they haven't told us which one they are, but they're one or the other. I really do believe that, and you've seen it in how well they play and how poorly they play. You say, if they could just play this well more often, think how great they'd be. Or, boy, this team, one more week of this and we're through, right? We're trade them all. It has been one of those years in an unusual way. Last year, they just had prolonged losing. That helped. Year before, they were, back in 2021, they won a bunch. They were first place for months, and then they lost all their games after that. And at least then you could feel good for a couple months and then terrible for a month. This year's been up and down every week, and that has made it exhausting, at least for me. I don't know about you.
No, absolutely. And this is, as we come to the All-Star break, this week, we mentioned it at the top with Paul Noonan, this week is crucial for the Cubs. Might as well do a prediction right now, because this team has to go 4-3 or 5-2 to stay in the we're buyers conversation. We're making a run at this division. Anything less than that against the Brewers and Yankees here, and we're talking 4 weeks until the trade deadline. And so this is your chance against the Brewers. You will play Cincinnati, only one game here going into the deadline, and then you're playing them that series. So this is a crucial week to help the Cubs make that decision.
Right, and out of the All-Star break, that first weekend back, they play Boston.
Yep.
Albeit at Wrigley, but they still play Boston for 3 games. So really, it's a 10-game period with the All-Star game, kind of a wraparound that will determine a lot of their fate. And the way the season has gone, I am convinced, especially with the pitching lineups, with the Cubs having their best pitchers pitching in the series, that the Cubs are going to go 3-1 against the Brewers, take 3 out of 4, just get within 4 games behind them. And then they're going to lose 2 out of 3 to the Yankees.
Yep.
And they're going to be 4-3 for the week.
I had the exact same thing written down. 4-3 for this week.
Yeah.
They might get lucky if the Yankees are already heading to the All-Star game and packing it in. They might be able to sneak an extra one, go 1-2, go 2-1 against the Yankees, but most likely 1-2, and 3 out of 4 against the Brewers. So I do think this is a 4-3 week myself.
Yeah, and I think what part of what made me think that the Yankee series would be tough is Garrett Cole's pitching in one of those games. Carlos Rodon is back from the dead just in time to face the Cubs, and then a perfect game guy is going on Sunday. We're going to blast him. I think Domingo Germán, we're going to blast him, but I think those first 2 games are going to be tough. But I really like the matchups the Cubs have in this series with Smiley and Hendricks and Steele and Stroman.
It couldn't have lined up any better going into the All-Star break here. So this is your shot.
Rodon. Yeah, exactly. Smiley against Cole and then Hendricks against Rodon. So, yeah, I think 4-3 this week. I'm curious to see how the Brewers will do when they're not playing the Cubs this week. I think we'll be win 3 out of 4, but then to Paul's point, the Brewers start playing Cincinnati in rapid succession. So They've got 3 against the Reds, and we'll be sitting there thinking if we could only sweep the Yankees, we could make up ground on both of these teams. But
the worst case scenario is that one of those teams pulls away from the other and takes 8 of 9 or something in these next 9 games that they have.
If we're going to beat the Brewers 3 out of 4, we want the Brewers to turn around and beat Cincinnati 2 out of 3.
Absolutely.
Right? Not by a lot, but just by a little. Yeah.
So this is crucial here. This is the next 2 weeks here. The next 10 games are going to most likely tell you where you're at as we roll into the final 4 weeks until the trade deadline. So
yeah. So
6 games back still. They're still 6 games back as the time of this recording. So it's a lot of ground to make up, not a lot of opportunities. So gotta see the Cubs do it.
Yep. Let's go. Let's bring it on. All you can do is win the games in front of you. So let's beat the Brewers and then move on to let's sweep the Brewers. Why not? We're at it, and then worry about the Yankees next, and then we'll worry about the second half when it shows up. Yeah,
can you believe we're halfway through the season already? Halfway through our 10th season of doing this podcast.
I can absolutely feel like that. Actually, this has been one of those seasons where, I feel the battle scars.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up here. If you want to interact with the show, the best way to do that is via our Twitter at WrigleyvilleNat. You can also follow us on Instagram at WrigleyvilleNat as well. DMs are open. You can tweet at us there. Best way to interact with the show. You can also, if you'd like to consume podcasts via YouTube, we're putting the audio versions right now up on YouTube. Hopefully in the second half of the season, we'll start putting up the video version of the podcast there as well. You can subscribe there, search for Wrigleyville Nation Podcast over on YouTube, or you can go to our website, wrigleyvillenation.com. That has all the links that I just described, the entire back catalog of this podcast, and the best way to support the show via our Patreon, patreon.com/WrigleyvilleNation. There we have new patrons that we want to shout out. We'll be shouting them out next week. Continue to support the show there. We can stay ad-free because you guys continue to support us there. Every single penny goes back into the show. And if you can't support us financially in these times, we understand that as well. So just tell your Cub fan friends about the podcast. Show them how to subscribe. That's the other way. Word of mouth is a great way to show support as well. And merchandise is another way. You can go to our store at our TeePublic store. The link is pinned to the top of our Twitter, top of our Facebook, and again, the store tab at WrigleyvilleNation.com. There, you can buy all kinds of merchandise. I was having coffee this morning out of my Wrigleyville Nation mug. I saw some people were sharing their Wrigleyville Nation shirt purchases with us. Always love to see. You can choose the colors to go with the logos, so it's always neat to see what combination people are choosing. So definitely, if you shop at our TeePublic shop, make sure you send your purchases to us. We'll give you a retweet as well. So with that, we are going to wrap it up. We're calling it a podcast. Enjoy the 4th of July, Pat.
Thank you, Jeremy, and same with you.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.